Love in a mist of doubt was lost. The wildwood paths were all crisscrossed. This way or that, oh, where was she? And which path led to the trysting tree? A green elf whispered right in her ear, "Are you sure your lover is quite sincere? Lovers are seldom what they seem, and love itself is a haunting dream." But a little blind god lived in a wood, unseen, unheard, in the path he stood. A feather dropped from an angel's wing. With speed he placed in his magic sling, straight into the heart of the maid it flew. Faith lived, doubt vanished. The world was new. And glory marked the path to her trust, and never again was love in a
Good morning and welcome. My name is Olas Karianis, and I am the field education student here at the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood. As always, a big thank you to the entire team that helps bring services to life each Sunday. For over a century, the Unitarian Society of Ridgewood has been a gathering in community as a home for liberal faith and free thinking. Now, as much as ever, we need communities like this that believe in the interdependence of humanity, in the power of love, and in the holy spark in every single person. Here in this community, we celebrate each person, whatever their gender, sexual orientation, age, education, history, race, ethnicity, economic status, physical or mental health, or theology. If this is your first time visiting one of our Sunday services, we are so glad you found us this morning, and welcome. Please consider staying for our virtual coffee hour. It's a great way to connect with small groups of folks. If you'd like to learn more about us, please fill out the Google form that will be dropped into the chat, or email our office at 113cottage@gmail.com, or visit our website, uuridgewood.org. If you have been joining us for a while and are curious about membership and want to take the next steps toward it, please contact Ann Peretti at usr.membership1@gmail.com. This month on Reeb Porch, we are collecting food bags. There are 3 options for food bags you can donate that we will distribute through the Women's Club of Ridgewood. Please check the e-blast from February 5th and help us as we try to do our part to ease food insecurity in our area. I want also to announce that Nancy Petrie a beloved congregant and a share house resident, has moved homes. She will be living in Chester, New Jersey, closer to her family. We will miss her so much. We will be sending around her phone number and address so you can send cards. Finally, today at 11:30 a.m., there is a multi-generational anti-racism event with a book reading and music. Please check the e-blast from yesterday for a link. And please remember that we are having a conversation on Tuesday at 7:30 about today's topic and how we address it with children. This conversation is open only to folks who are caretakers of or primary influences on children and youth. We are so glad you are here with us this morning.
Please join us in the words for lighting the chalice. They can be found on your screen. We light this chalice for the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action as we gather together in the circle of community.
Take a deep breath. In your body. Be in your body in this time, in your space, however you are able. In this moment, each of our bodies, a mass of cells, flesh and blood, bone and water, each of our hearts, a riot of emotions, fear and hope, sorrow and love, each of our minds, an endless fountain, thoughts and questions, second guesses and visions, each of our souls, a vast wonderment, known yet unknown, unique yet universal. In this moment, our bodies, hearts, minds, and souls come together, joined by our shared need to be seen and loved for our glorious wholeness. Take a deep breath and listen as this tone calls you, all of you, into loving community. Today, as I'm sure you know, is Valentine's Day. This day ostensibly celebrates romantic love. Legend has it that one of the 3 Catholic saints named Valentine was martyred for performing secret weddings for Christians in a time when it was illegal. In fact, we don't really know for certain why an association with love developed, except that we do know that in his work, Parliament of Fowls, Geoffrey Chaucer offers the first known association when he associates Valentine's Day with the mating of birds. Shakespeare goes on to reference the day in Hamlet, and over time, over centuries, the association with love and romance strengthened until we have what we have today, this sort of strange commercial experience of Valentine's Day. Normally, around this time of year, I will preach about how there are many different kinds of love. The Greeks had so many names for it, right? Among those, eros, sexual and romantic love, philautia, which is love of self, philia, love of friend, agape, that big love of everyone and everything that we talk about a lot. And I usually focus on that big capital L love that we all can know and feel, that love that sustains us. And I stand by every word of those other Valentine's Day sermons. But today I'm not going to talk about agape and holy love for all beings. Today we're going to talk about sex. Sex as expression of love, sex as expression of self-love, sex as healthy, normal if we insist on using that word, and holy and magical and human. And I'm going to say the word sex a bunch right now to demystify its use in Sunday service. And I welcome you to say it along with me at home. Sex, sex, sex. And I want to acknowledge that just as last week's service brought up many things for many of you, sensitive things, even painful and traumatic things, so too might this week. Sex is not an easy topic. I encourage you to consider your needs, your feelings as we move through this service, and to be gentle with yourself and care for yourself. If you need to step away from your computer, you can do that. If you find this week, as you process today, that you need to talk, send me an email, we'll find a time to talk. It isn't always easy, but being able to speak about these things and to hopefully find our way toward greater health and joy together is important. And so while last week we affirmed our bodies, and this week we affirm that we get to choose how to use these bodies, to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel pleasure, to be embodied in every sense of the word. So happy Valentine's Day, friends. Thank you for spending this precious time with us.
Please join us for our hymn, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire, number 34. Though I may speak with bravest fire and have the gift to all inspire, but have not love, my words are vain, as sounding brass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess, and striving so may love profess, but not begin my love within, the prophet soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are freed.
Good morning, everyone. As you know, this February, we are exploring the challenge of love through the lens of the body, sex, loss, and country. Today, we continue our journey about love by, yes, exploring the S word, sex. Years ago, I met with a financial planner for the first time. I asked lots of questions. I mean, lots of questions. He finally said, "Didn't your parents ever teach you about money management?" I thought about it and said, "In my family, two things were never discussed: sex and money." In many ways, the two are related. Money is how we manage resources, and sex is about how we manage and express our life energy, both of which were never discussed in my home. Like Unitarian Universalism, my birth religion was a source of information about sex. From there, all similarities ended. Sadly, my religious education included no information about sex, just moral imperatives that created a dualistic belief system. Sex was only virtuous if it was within the union of marriage and its intended outcome was the creation of a family. Women who engaged in premarital sex were bad girls. This archaic and faulty moral framework was in juxtaposition to the early 70s. And ask anyone who came of age then, the early 70s were really the 60s, socially and culturally. While the 60s broke this archaic virtuous cycle and regarded sex as beautiful and a natural expression of life force, it also was the Wild West in terms of boundaries, consent, safety, and protection. So for me, these clashing forces of morality and free expression created a lot of confusion and fear. As a young woman, I was kind of afraid of my own life force, of my own sexuality, instead of celebrating my human birthright and the pleasure of expressing this life force. So, if you do not view sex and sexuality through the dualistic framework of good versus bad, how do we teach it? The curriculum of Our Whole Lives, or OWL, is a values based curriculum that seeks to educate and explore through a class community age appropriate information and activities around the body, healthy relationships, bullying, boundaries, consent, decision making, and so much more. We offer age appropriate curriculum for K through grade 1, grades 4 through 6, and grades 8 through 9. We offer this course because we believe that faith based sexual education contributes to the development of the whole person, and anything that supports the creation of a whole person is religious education. We are a congregation rich in faith based sexual educators. I would estimate that there are 20 to 25 congregants, perhaps many more, plus your minister and me, who have also been trained and taught faith based sexual education over the years. Imagine that. Today, most of our children and youth are not saddled with a good versus evil approach to sex. But our children and youth are bombarded with messages about how they should look, feel, and dress. There is a lot of confusion at every age about consent and a lot of misrepresentation of what healthy intimacy is. The public school sex education curriculum spends little to no time on exploring the intersection of values and sexuality. This coming Tuesday at 7:30, our series, How to Talk to Your Children About Body Image, Sex, Loss, and Country for parents, grandparents, and caretakers continues as we share challenges and wisdom with each other. Reverend Sarah will be facilitating the discussion and will be joined by our OWL facilitators for the upcoming session on sex. And we hope you will join us.
Good morning. My name is Rose Castillo-Leon, and I'm a member of the Board of Trustees. Part of laying the groundwork for the future of our congregation is making our weekly offering that helps to sustain the work of this community. We know that we benefit from those who have gone before. Generation of folks just like us who believed in community, in justice, in transformation, and the healing power of love. They gave so that we might today belong to and build the supportive and sustaining community. Generations after us will still need to fight for liberation and equality for all. They will still need to provide their children with experiences that help them grow into themselves. They will still need a place to go to be reminded of their highest aspirations and affirmed in their wholeness. Our giving now ensures the future of this congregation for years to come. A community exists because of you, and it will survive because of you, your passion, your time, your talents, and also your donations. Whatever you are able to give, we are thankful for your generosity. The offering will now be given and gratefully received.
Du mein Gedanke, du mein Sein und Frieden, du meines Herzens erste Seligkeit. Ich liebe dich wie nichts auf dieser Erde. Ich liebe dich, ich liebe dich, ich liebe dich in Zeit und Ewigkeit. Ich liebe dich in Zeit und Ewigkeit. Ich denke, dein kann stets nur deiner denken. Nur deinem Glück ist dieses Herz geweiht. Wie Gott auch mag des Lebens Schicksal lenken. Ich liebe dich, ich liebe dich, ich liebe dich in Zeit und Ewigkeit. Ich liebe dich in Zeit und Ewigkeit.
Ok. Pablo Neruda, soneto 17, 100 sonetos de amor. No te amo como si fueras rosa de sal, topacio o flecha de claveles que propagan el fuego. Te amo como se aman ciertas cosas oscuras, secretamente, entre la sombra y el alma. Te amo como la planta que no florece y lleva dentro de sí, escondida, la luz de aquellas flores, y gracias a tu amor vive oscuro en mi cuerpo el apretado aroma que ascendió de la tierra. Te amo sin saber cómo, ni cuándo, ni de dónde. Te amo directamente sin problemas ni orgullo. Así te amo porque no sé amar de otra manera, sino así de este modo en que no soy ni eres, tan cerca que tu mano sobre mi pecho es mía, tan cerca que se cierran tus ojos con mi sueño. Sonnet 17. I don't love you as if you were a rose of salt, topaz, or arrow of carnations that propagate fire. I love you as one loves certain obscure things, secretly, between the shadow and the soul. I love you as the plant that doesn't bloom but carries the light of those flowers hidden within itself, And thanks to your love, the tight aroma that arose from the earth lives dimly in my body. I love you without knowing how or when or from where. I love you directly without problems or pride. I love you like this because I don't know any other way to love, except in this form in which I am not, nor are you, so close that your hand upon my chest is mine, so close that your eyes close with my dreams.
Each Sunday, we take time in our service for quiet and contemplation, for prayer and meditation. I invite you now to come into this time with me. Find as comfortable a position for your body as you are able, and take a slow and even, deep breath in. And let that breath out slowly. Take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out slowly through your mouth. Relax your shoulders. Let your hands rest loosely. Let your tongue fall from the roof of your mouth and unclench your jaw. Take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out slowly through your mouth. This morning, gathered in beloved community, we offer gratitude for the loving care that holds our lives. For the strangers across the world and in our own communities, who with loving hearts and loving hands tend to and heal the sick, invent new medicines, vaccines, lay the dead to rest. As we continue to navigate a pandemic that has stolen so many and so much from us, but that cannot steal love. We offer gratitude for the honorable and just striving for the better in our government, who with loving conviction and loving determination attempt to bring justice, work for unity, make real change, even as among us are those who would see our nation torn apart by violence and demagoguery rather than brought together by love. We offer gratitude for the friends and family encircling our lives, who with loving kindness and loving care support us, challenge us to be our best selves, hold our hands as we work always to become authentically ourselves, connecting more closely with our own beings and with each other as we live lives guided by love. For all these and for those myriad wonders of humanity around this world that help deepen our connections and that bring more love into being, this morning we offer our gratitude and our love in return. There is so much to be thankful for. May we be part of that cycle of love, acting with courage and compassion, offering gratitude, and creating more and more love in this world. So may it be. Amen.
Soneto 11. Tengo hambre de tu boca, de tu voz, de tu pelo, y por las calles voy sin nutrirme callado. No me sostiene el pan, el alba me desquicia, busco el sonido líquido de tus pies en el día. Estoy hambriento de tu risa resbalada, de tus manos color de furioso granero. Tengo hambre de la pálida piedra de tus uñas. Quiero comer tu piel como una intacta almendra. Quiero comer el rayo quemado en tu hermosura, la nariz soberana del arrogante rostro. Quiero comer la sombra fugaz de tus pestañas. Y hambriento vengo y voy olfateando el crepúsculo buscándote. buscando tu corazón caliente como un puma en la soledad de Kitratue. Sonnet 11. I crave your mouth, your voice, your hair. Silent and starving, I prowl through the streets. Bread does not nourish me. Dawn disrupts me. All day I hunt for the liquid measure of your steps. I hunger for your sleek laugh, your hands the color of a savage harvest. Hunger for the pale stones of your fingernails. I want to eat your skin like a whole almond. I want to eat the sunbeam flaring in your lovely body, the sovereign nose of your arrogant face. I want to eat the fleeting shade of your lashes. And I pace around hungry, sniffing the twilight, hunting for you, for your hot heart, like a puma in the barrens of Kitratue.
Las venas, veins. The bluish bloom of veins draw mazes mysterious under the wax of my skin. Faint hydrography, barely apparent. Agile channels that lead desires and poisons and lovely food. La flora El sexo, sex. Hidden pulsating rose in the dark furrow, well of shuddering joy that burns in an instant the murky course of my life. Secret always inviolate, fertile wound. Los senos, breasts. They are two placid hills that barely rocks my breath. They are two delicate fruits of pale vanad. It was two full glasses, food and nutrition in full season, and they keep feeding two button flowers. Son los placidos colinas
Ethical sexual pleasure is holy. If you hear me say nothing else this morning, hear that. Ethical sexual pleasure is holy. I grew up with two wildly different versions of sex education. In school, there was a lot of technical information about the physiology of sex and pleasure, and there was a lot of talk about what horrible things could happen. I grew up in New York City in the 1980s and the 1990s, and truly, without fail, the message was, if you have sex, you will either get pregnant or you will get AIDS and die. The sexual education at school put the fear of God into me and many in my generation. It wasn't quite a matter of shame, but one of medical and physical health and safety. Simultaneously, I had the precursor to the Our Whole Lives curriculum that Jeannie mentioned. That precursor to OWL was called AYS, About Your Sexuality. That class also carried no shame, and it wasn't fear-based in the same way. That class is the one where I learned about condoms and dental dams and the idea that human sexuality, as expressed on one's own or with others, should not be feared, but treated as the hugely important interpersonal and ethical issue that it is. I managed to escape my sexual education without growing a sense of shame about sex. As we talked about last week, I didn't escape shame altogether, but in this I did. But for so many others, and as a result of religious teachings all too often, so many others are raised on the notion that sex is dirty, that masturbation is a sin, that pleasure should play no role because we're designed only to procreate. The big three monotheistic religions have a core story about creation that has lent itself to interpretations that reinforce shame. And of course, I'm talking about the Adam and Eve story. This Christmas, I gave my children The Brick Bible by Brendan Powell Smith. Basically, Smith spent what I can only imagine was an unreal amount of time creating Lego-style brick tableau for every story in the Bible. And this has been my children's first real introduction to these stories. They came in basically cold, and they were astonished by the creation story. The idea of a God who creates man out of clay to resemble God's self, then casts about for a companion and creates woman from that man's rib. They get to live in this beautiful place, and then along comes this snake that suggests they eat the fruit from this tree and gain knowledge, and they do it. But God's told them not to eat from this tree, and when they do, God knows because suddenly they feel shame about their nakedness, and God is enraged. And their punishment is that they're going to toil on earth, struggling to bring forth nourishment from the land, and childbirth will be agonizing, and that shame will be their companion. My Unitarian Universalist children were pretty horrified that God, who they have only ever heard me speak of as love, would do such a thing to God's beloved children. Horrified that knowledge would be considered a bad thing. And I'll admit that rereading the story with them, I was horrified anew at the implied belief that knowledge created shame about our bodies, and that the needs of our bodies to work and move, to eat, have sex, procreate were viewed as punishments. This story has resulted in millennia of pain and repression, and of course, patriarchy. From it and the various interpretations folks have made over time stem ideas about how to control women and their bodies so they don't make further mistakes. Ideas about the purpose of sex being purely for procreation and a result for being only within the confines of marriage. Ideas about masturbation as being a waste of opportunity for procreation. For millennia, too many religions and too many cultures have denied the wholeness of our bodies, ostensibly made in the image of God with all of God's capacity for pleasure, and denied what these bodies are capable of. And of course, the messages we receive about bodies and sex and pleasure don't just come from religion and this foundational story. They come from the media, from our families, potentially from painful, traumatic, or abusive experiences. These messages come from friends and from teachers. This long history of denying wholeness is also a history of increasing shame, embarrassment, enforcing self-doubting, and even self-hatred. I'm guessing that many of you have firsthand experience with the kind of terrible feeling that can come along with all that inherited shame. It isn't easy to talk about this stuff exactly because we have consciously and conscientiously made it uncomfortable over the course of human history. We have offered narrow definitions for acceptable sexual expression, and we have literally killed people to defend those notions. Honestly, many of us find it hard to talk about sex among friends, let alone on Sunday mornings amidst our spiritual community. But we are a community that rejects the dualism of mind and body. And so we have to start talking more about life in these bodies of ours and all the amazing things these bodies can feel. So I'll say it again, ethical sexual pleasure, and we're going to define what ethical is. Ethical sexual pleasure isn't just fun and doesn't just feel good. It is downright holy. That's what I contend this morning. And if it is holy, then we can drop the shame. We can drop the self-loathing, and instead we can embrace the joy. Ethical sexual pleasure is holy. So let's start with this question of ethics. My colleague, the Reverend Jen Grayson, shared with me a sermon that she preached on sex, in which she delves into the guidelines that Dr. Marie Fortune's book, Love Does No Harm, offers for healthy sexual relationships. Rev Grayson outlines these guidelines for a healthy sexual relationship that apply to all of us, regardless of our sexuality. And so although Dr. Fortune writes of these guidelines as for healthy relationships, we might also take them as our guidelines for ethical sexual relationships. An ethical sexual relationship, one, happens between peers. And not everyone is a peer, of course. Children, folks who work with us or for us, patients or clients or congregants we serve, all of those folks are off limits because the power imbalance renders consent impossible. When power differences are present, whether that power is over a job or a grade or money, there can be no assurance of real consent. And so number two, consent, that's the next guideline. And that means full, authentic, real consent, not coerced, physically or otherwise, not feigned consent. Honest to goodness, I, of my own free will, want to do this thing, consent. So real consent requires a balance of power, but it also requires full and shared information and an awareness of what will happen and what it may mean. Third, an ethical sexual relationship requires responsibility on the part of each person. Responsibility for consent, but also for protection and comfort and literal health in the form of protection against sexually transmitted diseases or unwanted pregnancies. So responsibility is one of those guidelines. And then another is faithfulness. And this doesn't necessarily mean monogamy, but faithfulness to the people with whom we are engaging in relationships, and faithfulness to ourselves and to the promises we make. It doesn't mean staying through thick and thin no matter what. Faithfulness means being open and honest and communicative about things, even things like changed feelings, even when it's hard. So we can say that an ethical sexual relationship happens with full and real consent between peers who take responsibility for each other and for themselves, and who remain honest and true to themselves and to their promises. Dr. Fortune in the book actually offers one final guideline for healthy sexual interaction, that it should be pleasurable. I'm not including it in my list for ethical sexual interaction. Here's why. Sometimes consenting peers who are responsible and faithful try a thing and it isn't pleasurable. Pleasure is the goal, of course, but it doesn't always happen. And I would argue that even beyond some sort of surface definition of pleasure, sexual interaction can create joy. And joy is the thing that moves sexual interaction from something our bodies are capable of doing to something that is holy and draws on our entire beings. And this is where we shift from our question of what is ethical to what I mean by holy. Last week, we talked about bodies, how we exist in different shapes, configurations, colors, and sizes. And we affirmed together that our bodies are ours, perfect in their differences, and that the work of loving our bodies, rejecting shaming and degradation because of our physicality, we agreed that that work is important spiritual work, because if we fail to do that work, then we acquiesce to the separation of our spirit, minds, and souls from our bodies. When we view ourselves as whole and complete beings, we understand the depth of our own holiness. When we deny the coherence and integrity of all the different parts of ourselves, we disconnect and we tear apart. Holiness is that wholeness. Holiness is that interconnection of all things, our ancestral commonality with each other and with the beginning of all things. Holiness is creation and being and joy and love and that overwhelming feeling of rightness that we glimpse once in a while when we're lucky and we've been paying attention. Holiness is the divine spark of being and life inside each of us. And that spark and being comes into its fullness in relationship. We believe here that our spiritual journey is best made in community. Our wholeness is best found in community, and so too our holiness. So when I say that ethical sexual pleasure is holy, I say it because the potential for sexual interaction to be profoundly connecting is real. The co-creation not of children, but of energy, release, joy, pleasure, love. These are elements of connection that are created through sexual interaction. Connection to each other is a way of affirming those filaments of being that hold us all together on that interconnected web. And ethical sexual pleasure is one means of connection. I hear that call for connection, that need to affirm those links. I hear that when I hear those Pablo Neruda poems read. He phrases so beautifully in ways that we can all relate to that desire to connect that drives us. We reach out for each other longingly with all of our beings. Connection is such a fundamental human need, articulated through poetry and art and music and religious ritual. It's fundamental because it's a reaching back and deep into the truth of our interconnections. And every moment and way that we connect together as human beings is an expression of that truth. It's an affirmation of that deep belief. Our connections are real, and our living out of those connections is holy. And it must be said that connecting to others is not the only kind of holy connection. So too is connecting to ourselves. We said that last week about loving our bodies. When we love our bodies, we live into our wholeness and holiness as human beings. So today we take it one step further, and I can hear your minds going, is our minister about to tell us to masturbate? You bet I am. Bringing sexual pleasure to ourselves, our whole embodied selves, safely, sanely, is an act of creation, joy, energy, self-love, and connection. All that nonsense about it being shameful, you can forget it. Connecting to yourself, knowing yourself as a whole being with body, heart, mind, and soul, all of which can know pain, but can also know pleasure. Knowing yourself intimately matters. And it matters all the more as we move through a time of enforced isolation and disconnection from each other. The pandemic has meant for some increased intimacy with loved ones, romantic or otherwise. But for many, it has meant a drop off in intimacy with others, as folks have been alone more than ever before. But we can claim that intimacy for ourselves, with ourselves, if we can let go of whatever negative messaging we have received. We can love our bodies and love on our bodies because ethical sexual interaction happens also with ourselves, and it too is holy. I realize that each of us arrives to this topic with so much. And perhaps you aren't there yet at that place where you can nod your head vigorously and agree with me that sexual pleasure that is ethical is holy. That's okay. But today, on this day when we celebrate love in all its varied forms, it's important to remember that we don't love only with our hearts and minds and souls. We also love with our bodies. We are never without these bodies of ours. Sexual joy through interaction with others or with ourselves, when it is with full consent among responsible and faithful peers, is a natural, healthy, fun, and wonderful way to affirm our whole beings and our holy living. It is ultimately an expression of love. The love that brings us closer together, the love that changes the world, the love that builds the future. May you experience joy and pleasure, wonder and love, not just on this Valentine's Day, but all the days of your life. So may it be.
Please join us for our hymn, Love Will Guide Us, number 131. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. Please join us in the words for extinguishing the chalice. They can be found on your screen. We extinguish the flame, but may the light of truth, the warmth of love, and the energy of action burn bright in our hearts until we are together again.